XRP just got its own stock on the NASDAQ. I need you to let that sink in for a second. A company called Evernorth Holdings, backed by Ripple, Kroc, and SBI Holdings, Pantera Capital, and Arrington Capital, just filed with the SEC to go public on the NASDAQ stock exchange. The ticker symbol will be XRPN. The company is led by former Ripple executive Ashish Birla, and its entire business model is designed to give investors liquid, transparent exposure to XRP through a publicly listed vehicle. They plan to increase XRP tokens per share by deploying assets across institutional lending, liquidity provisioning, and yield strategies. This is essentially XRP's version of MicroStrategy's Bitcoin play, but built from the ground up with Ripple's blessing and backed by the biggest names in crypto venture capital. And that's not even the biggest news today. March 27th just became the most important date on the calendar for every XRP holder alive because two massive deadlines are now converging on the same day. The SEC's final deadline on the remaining batch of XRP ETF applications lands March 27th, and the $14.60 $6 million options expiry on Darabet also hits March 27th. Two potential catalysts on the same date. If new ETFs get approved the same day that options mechanics are amplifying momentum, the compounding effect could be explosive. Before I go further, this is not financial advice. I'm sharing publicly available information and analysis for educational and entertainment purposes only. Always do your own research and consult a qualified professional. Let me break down the Evernorth filing because I don't think the market understands how significant this is. Evernorth isn't a random startup. This company was backed by Ripple itself alongside Kraken, SBI Holdings, Pantera Capital, and Arrington Capital, some of the most respected institutional investors in crypto. They announced the public listing plan back in October through a merger with a special purpose acquisition company called Armada Acquisition Corporation (Q). Now the registration statement has been filed with the SEC, and once approved, the combined entity will trade on NASDAQ under the ticker XRP for common shares and XRPNW for public warrants. The significance is that this creates an entirely new on-ramp for traditional investors to get XRP exposure without ever touching a crypto exchange. Institutional investors who can't or won't buy crypto directly now have a NASDAQ-listed stock that's essentially a XRP accumulation vehicle. Every dollar that flows into XRPN creates buying pressure on XRP because the company's core strategy is to acquire and hold XRP tokens. This is the same flywheel that MicroStrategy created for Bitcoin, where the stock becomes a magnet for capital that then translates into actual token demand and the leadership is credible. Ashish Birla was a Ripple executive who understood the ecosystem from the inside. The backing from Ripple means this isn't a third-party bet on XRP. It's an officially endorsed vehicle that Ripple participated in funding. The backing from SBI Holdings connects it to Japan's largest financial conglomerate, which has been one of Ripple's most important partners for years. And Pantera Capital is one of the oldest and most respected crypto-focused venture firms in the world. Now, let me talk about March 27th because when two catalysts hit the same date, the probability of a significant move increases dramatically. The SEC is reviewing the final batch of XRP ETF applications with a maximum deadline of March 27th. The approval path is cleaner than ever because the SEC just classified XRP as a digital commodity this week, and they've already approved Bitcoin and Ethereum spot ETFs under the same commodity framework. If new XRP ETFs get approved, it would expand the number of regulated investment vehicles available and potentially trigger a fresh wave of institutional inflows. Remember, the existing XRP ETFs have already pulled in $1.44 billion in cumulative inflows. New products from additional asset managers could add billions more. Simultaneously, the 14.6 million options expiry on Darabet hits the same day. Nearly 25% of all XRP open interest is concentrated at the $140 strike for this expiry, with XRP currently trading around $153. The calls at this level are deep in the money. As expiry approaches, market makers hedging these positions could amplify upward momentum. If the ETF approval news drops on the same day that options mechanics are creating a tailwind, the two forces compound each other. And there's more happening today. Ripple just announced a major expansion into Brazil, offering integrated services, including payments, custody, stablecoins, trading, and treasury solutions. They're targeting banks, fintech firms, and crypto exchanges, allowing them to manage the entire life cycle of digital assets within a single ecosystem. Banco Genial, Brasa Bank, and Nomad have already signed up. Brazil's rapidly developing digital economy and its Pix instant payment system make it one of the highest growth markets for blockchain in the world, and Ripple sees it as a gateway to the broader Latin American region. On top of that, Ripple just executed a 20 million XRP transfer in a single on-chain transaction, paying a fee of just 0.000015 XRP. While large transfers happen regularly, the timing alongside the Evernorth filing, the Brazil expansion, and the approaching March 27th deadline has the community speculating about what's happening behind the scenes. Whales have also accumulated roughly 200 million additional XRP tokens over the past 2 weeks, reflecting growing confidence among large holders. Now, let me address the price picture because XRP is at a critical juncture. The token is trading at $153, holding above the breakout levels from last week. It closed above both the parallel channel on the 3-day chart and the symmetrical triangle on the daily chart. These are the first confirmed breakouts above both patterns this year. However, analyst Shu from Alt-Cryptogames cautioned that XRP remains in deep trouble until it reclaims the $180 level, which flipped from support to resistance when XRP closed below it at the end of January. Until that level is recovered, the bearish structure from a higher time frame perspective remains intact. The path to $5 was analyzed in detail by 247 Wall Street today. At $5, XRP's market cap would be around $306 billion, roughly triple where it is now. They outlined 5 things that need to happen. First, the Clarity Act needs to pass to give institutions permanent legal certainty. Second, Bitcoin needs to break above 80,000 to trigger altcoin rotation. Third, ETF assets need to grow past 3 to 5 billion to create a genuine supply squeeze. Fourth, whale behavior needs to shift fully from distribution to accumulation. And fifth, the macro environment needs to support risk assets through rate cuts and geopolitical de-escalation. The encouraging thing is that multiple of these conditions are already in motion. The SEC commodity classification happened this week. The Clarity Act is moving through the Senate with markup potentially in late April. Bitcoin rallied past 74,000 this week. Whale flows turned positive. And the administration says the Iran conflict is winding down. Not all 5 conditions are met yet, but the trajectory is clearly moving in the right direction. The Fed held rates steady at 3.5 to 3.75% today as expected. They're projecting only one more cut in 2026, which is more hawkish than some hoped, but Goldman Sachs still projects 2 cuts, bringing rates to around 3 to 3.25%. If those cuts materialize and oil pulls back from current levels, the macro headwind that's been suppressing crypto all year could finally reverse. Standard Chartered's year-end target of 280 represents a 100% gain from here. The ascending triangle measured move targets 260. If the sell wall breaks, the highway to $1.95 opens with zero resistance according to analyst CW 8900. And if the Clarity Act passes and NDA-protected partnerships go public, the repricing could target $5 to $8 according to the more bullish institutional models. So here's where we stand on March 19, 2026. XRP has its own stock filing for NASDAQ under ticker XRPN. March 27th brings dual deadlines with ETF approvals and options expiry. Ripple expanded into Brazil with multiple banks already on board. The SEC classified XRP as a commodity this week. The Clarity Act markup is being targeted for late April. Whales accumulated 200 million XRP in 2 weeks. And XRP is holding above every technical breakout from the past 10 days. This has been the most consequential week for XRP since the SEC lawsuit was filed in 2020. The commodity classification, the NASDAQ filing, the political pressure from the administration, the Korean volume explosion, the technical breakouts, and now the March 27th dual catalyst. Every piece of the puzzle is falling into place. If this opened your eyes, smash that like button. Drop a comment with your price target, subscribe, and hit the bell because March 27th is 8 days away and everything could change. Share this with someone who needs to know that XRP just got its own stock on the NASDAQ. I'll see you in the next one. Wait, before I go, I want to spend a few minutes on why the MicroStrategy comparison for Evernorth is so powerful. Because if you understand what happened with MicroStrategy and Bitcoin, you'll understand exactly what could happen with XRPN and XRP. MicroStrategy started buying Bitcoin in August of 2020 when BTC was around $11,000. The company's stock became a proxy for Bitcoin exposure, and institutional investors who couldn't buy Bitcoin directly poured money into MicroStrategy shares instead. That created a flywheel. Money flows into the stock. The company uses that capital to buy more Bitcoin. The Bitcoin purchases drive up the price. The higher Bitcoin price makes the stock more valuable. More money flows in. The cycle repeats. MicroStrategy stock went from around $15 before their Bitcoin strategy to over $1,000 during the Bitcoin peak. The company's Bitcoin holdings grew from a few hundred million to tens of billions. And critically, MicroStrategy's buying created real sustained demand for Bitcoin that existed outside of the crypto exchange ecosystem entirely. Now, imagine that same dynamic applied to XRP. Evernorth trading under XRPN on NASDAQ would give institutional investors a regulated stock to buy that represents XRP exposure. Every dollar flowing into XRPN shares would translate into XRP buying pressure as the company executes its strategy of increasing XRP tokens per share. Traditional investors who would never open a Coinbase account could buy XRP through their Schwab, Fidelity, or Vanguard brokerage. Pension funds that can't hold crypto directly could potentially allocate to a NASDAQ-listed stock that happens to be an XRP accumulation vehicle. The backing from Ripple, Kraken, SBI, Panta, and Arrington gives this institutional credibility that a random startup wouldn't have. And the leadership of former Ripple executive Ashish Birla means the strategy will be informed by deep inside knowledge of the XRP ecosystem. This isn't speculation. This is a registered SEC filing for a NASDAQ listing. It's happening. If Evernorth achieves even a fraction of MicroStrategy success, the demand pressure on XRP could be transformative. MicroStrategy currently holds over 200,000 Bitcoin. If Evernorth accumulates even a few billion XRP through its treasury strategy, that supply being permanently removed from the market and locked in a publicly auditable corporate treasury. Now, let me also address the broader context of what the administration is doing because it ties directly into why all of these developments are converging right now. The president publicly attacked the banks over the Clarity Act. The Treasury Secretary called them recalcitrant. The SEC classified XRP as a commodity. The CFTC signed a joint oversight agreement. The administration appointed Ripple's CEO to its advisory committee. And the White House set multiple deadlines pressuring all parties to reach a deal. This level of coordinated political support for specific crypto assets regulatory clarity is unprecedented. Senator Loomis confirmed that the Senate Banking Committee plans to mark up the Clarity Act in the second half of April. Senator Moreno warned that if it doesn't pass by May, the bill may not move again in 2026 because midterm election dynamics will consume the Senate's attention. That creates a narrow window, April to May. If the Clarity Act passes in that window, the SEC commodity classification becomes permanent federal law. The NDA wave of partnership announcements could flood the market and XRP gets repriced at a structural level. The $5 roadmap from 247, Wall Street requires 5 conditions. Clarity Act passage, Bitcoin above 80,000, ETF assets past 3 to 5 billion, whale accumulation sustained, and a supportive macro environment. Let me score where we are on each one. Clarity Act Senate markup targeted for late April. Poly market at 56%, Garlinghouse at 80 to 90%, momentum clearly moving forward. Score 70% there. Bitcoin currently around 71 to 74,000 needs to break 80,000. Getting closer but not there yet. Score 60% there. ETF assets currently at 1.44 billion needs 3 to 5 billion. New ETF approvals on March 27th could accelerate this. Score 40% there. Whale behavior flows turned positive. 200 million accumulated in 2 weeks, but some distribution still happening. Score 65% there. Macro environment, Fed holding, oil still elevated, Iran winding down but not resolved, rate cuts potentially coming later in the year. Score 45% there. Overall, I'd say we're roughly 55% of the way to the conditions needed for $5. That's not a guarantee, but 6 months ago, we were maybe 15% of the way there. The trajectory is accelerating, and the March 27th dual deadline could push multiple conditions forward simultaneously if ETF approvals land and the options mechanics amplify the move. Let me also take a moment to recap this incredible week, because if you've been following this channel, you've watched an extraordinary series of events unfold in real time. Last week, we covered Goldman Sachs being exposed as the largest XRP ETF holder, MasterCard adding Ripple to their $9 trillion network, Ripple's $750 million buyback at $50 billion, the SEC-CFTC agreement, the trendline breakout, the manipulation debate, the 920% tokenization explosion, the whale flow reversal, the 50 EMA break, Ripple's CTO answering the $100 question. This week we covered the SEC officially classifying XRP as a digital commodity, the Korean volume explosion, the options battleground, Trump versus the banks over the Clarity Act, Ripple's expansion into Brazil, and now the Evernorth NASDAQ filing under ticker XRPN. That's roughly 15 major catalysts in 8 days. I've been covering XRP for a while, and I have never seen anything close to this density of fundamental, regulatory, technical, and institutional developments converging in such a compressed time frame. The market hasn't fully processed any of it yet because the macro environment is suppressing price action. But when macro clears, the repricing against this fundamental backdrop could be historic. March 27th is 8 days away. The ETF deadline, the options expiry, and potentially the beginning of the next chapter for XRP. If this opened your eyes, smash that like button, drop a comment with your price target, subscribe, and hit the bell, because March 27th is 8 days away and everything could change. Share this with someone who needs to know that XRP just got its own stock on the NASDAQ. I'll see you in the next one.